I have to get back into the groove again. I only got back this afternoon, so we will start directly, unless somebody has something they feel they want to say. We'll start directly with our speaker. I think just about everybody in this room knows the speaker very well. He was at the Milton Hershey School, working for them for 41 years. He started, I guess, as the head residential in the head residential program, and he was there 15 minutes, about 15. Then he planning and research, and finally his last job was the director of school and community relations. He retired in 1992, and as he told me, he retired on Friday and he started working on Monday in the archives, the Hershey, no, the Milton Hershey School historical records, and that's where he's been ever since, and it's still there. I would like to introduce Dr. Joseph Breckbill.
Thank you for all coming tonight. I said to Lois before we left home, well, I wonder whether anybody will show up. And she said, well, I will, and I'm bringing one person with me. It's really a fine thing to see all my good friends from Hershey, and a lot of people I haven't seen for a number of years. We hope that after we spend time together tonight, you'll consider yourself to have spent a good night. When Kathy asked me if I would be available to talk to the Historical Society, she caught me at a weak moment, and I said yes. Really, because I consider it an opportunity to talk with people who are interested in history, in the Hershey history, and interested in connecting the present with the past as we look forward to the future. It also gave me an opportunity to talk about his ideas. While I consider it an honor to be standing here, I also experience a deep sense of humility, and an awareness that we don't know, there's a lot we don't know about our past that has relevance for the day. I'm also aware that many of you know much more about the history of Hershey since you have lived here. Maybe you were born here in Hershey and experienced a lot of the history that we share in common. But capturing that information is dependent on people working together before it is lost forever. I hesitate to mention names because there are so many people who have contributed to the information we now have. But I think I want to mention a few who have contributed in a special way to the subject for the evening. First, I salute the dedication and focus of those who have been instrumental in getting this historical society started. Having served on advisory boards in the past, I have an understanding of the efforts that go into making it possible and have been made to collect and archive information about the community. The very fact that we have several organizations in the township that collect and retain information is an indication to me of the interest that exists among the people in Hershey. And I think this interest that people still have is trying to understand the man whose decisions have benefited so many others. It is entirely possible that if others had made decisions, had the decisions to make instead of Mr. Hershey, the decisions would have been much different and less beneficial. It is the idealism of Mr. Hershey that people are trying to understand. Catherine shared this idealism that we have come to know as the Hershey way. The book, It Was Kitty's Idea, would never have been printed had it not been for the encouragement of my wife Lois. It was her encouragement and sometimes pointed prodding to make target dates that proved successful in moving the work forward. A timeline that extended over a period of of almost a decade. My presentation this evening will be divided into 3 parts. First, an explanation of some of the history that leads up to the events that we all have read about in the papers during the last 10 years or so. These reports not only captured our attention, but left us sad in knowing that our feeling of family in the community was being challenged as never before. Many people said, if only Milton could come back and live here just for one day. To straighten things out, then we could return to the peaceful existence that we knew and concentrate on how we could continue to grow and improve our community. We could make things better for everyone. And secondly, I'd like you to become better acquainted with Catherine Hershey through the media of a PowerPoint presentation. Catherine Elizabeth Sweeney was a force behind the curtain on the stage on which Milton played. In many ways, it was Kitty who was directing the play when it came to the school, and in some ways the community as well. Lastly, if time permits, a question and answer period. It has been said that those who have no knowledge of their past are destined to repeat it, the good and the bad. People who know not their history are like a ship on the ocean, on the open sea, without a compass. They have no sense of direction as to where they are going, or any idea about where they came from. It would seem that people of Hershey are determined not to allow that to happen to them. The Hershey community is a community that is interested in learning about the past. This takes on new significance as new people move into the community and become interested and active in the life of the community. We have the school's archival program, historical records they call it, that can trace its history to the days of Milton himself. The Hershey Museum can do the same. And then we have the Foundation's Community Archive, which got its official start in the mid-1980s. A few years later, the Historical Society of Derry Township, a grassroots organization with a membership that continues to grow. For those of us who are long-term residents, our challenge is not to view our knowledge of the past as some kind of privileged information, only to have those who've lived here for many years, or who have been born here. We need to share this information with those that move into our community. This interest in our grassroots as a community is understandable. Milton Hershey, who basically founded this unique community as we know it, has now been going for 60 years. We are faced today with many challenges that are new. Many of these challenges were not faced by our founder because the challenges did not exist. However, Milton and Catherine had challenges of their own, many of which are similar. And we seek to understand as much as we can about the way they handled their challenges, in the hope that we can learn from what they did as we seek and continue in our efforts to make our decisions in keeping with their thinking. It is the purpose of the historical institutions to organize and collect material that still exists that details what has happened in the past so that we can study what the problems and challenges were and how they were handled by Milton and Catherine. But in all of this, we have a tendency to concentrate on dates, events, sequences, and things of that nature. We collect documents, pictures. We have interviews with people who actually worked with Milton or knew Catherine personally. While all of this is interesting and of value, we eventually have to get around to the conclusion that all the facts and collection of artifacts, while helping us to visualize the past, does little in understanding the thinking of people who who use the artifacts we collect. The more years we live, and distance increases between the day and the days of Milton and Catherine, we have to depend more and more on this collection of things that we have made. They do give us clues as to what the thinking was of those who created our community. But unfortunately, for us, Milton wrote very little that would give us any in-depth understanding of his thinking. We have some interviews and we have some records of decisions that he made on some important issues. We also have some quotes from things he said publicly, dedicating a building or at some affair honoring him. Milton was one who remembered a teaching he learned in his Mennonite home. That is, that one should always say less than they think. It almost sounds like Dale Carnegie, doesn't it? The events surrounding our community since the Second World War resulted in a conflict between the ideals of the past and the ideals of a wider world view. The entire American society was changed as a result of the war. The GI Bill made it possible for many to go to school for additional education and training. The war experience for many young men and women opened their eyes to other cultures and world issues in a way that changed American society forever. Many of these changes were felt here in the Hershey community. There was an influx of thoughts based on values that were foreign to many in the community. Decisions were made for the community and the relationship between the community and the business interests of the township in the past that left many scratching their heads and wondering what people were thinking, or wondering how they ever came up with that conclusion. The truth is that many of those who came up with ideas did not fully appreciate or understand the Hershey way. Many who did understand had views previously held modified by their experiences gained during the war. This created a situation where progress was viewed by some as something that was new and innovative. There developed a decreasing regard for things that were a Hershey tradition. If we want to understand the Hersheys and what they would do in response to the challenges of the day, we must get on the same page as the Hersheys were on and look at things in a way compatible with the way they thought and reacted. Anyone who has studied the Hersheys knows that Hershey believed in finding ways to do things better. But always those things of doing things better were built on a foundation of principles and values on which there was no compromise. The story is told of Milton Hershey's minister, Henry Stump, going to see Milton about his soul. Maybe at the suggestion of Fanny, we don't know. Reverend Stump put the question to Milton directly. Milton, what is your religion? Well, Milton replied, I believe in the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule. Reverend Stump, in a fatherly and kind voice, counseled Milton by saying, Milton, I do not believe that will be enough to get you into heaven. After a moment of silence, Milton replied, well, Pastor, I guess it'll just have to do. There are many today who would have agreed with Pastor Stump, but it is not difficult to understand Milton's reply. Milton had grown up in a home where mother and father did not agree on very many things. There were arguments between Henry and Fanny about most anything, and religion was one of them. But there was never a question about a faith and a belief in a supreme being. Milton felt that if people would live by the 10 Commandments and the Golden Rule, there would be peace among people, and a code of living that God himself handed down to his people, providing the basis for relationships that would surpass all man-made codes that he knew about. Think about it for a moment. And after the meeting, go home and read Exodus 20. That's where the Ten Commandments are found. If mankind would live according to God's rules of relationships in the world in which we live, the world in which we live would be a far different world than it is today. I marvel at the simplicity of Milton's thinking and the focus he had on the problems of his day. For the past 13 years, I have worked at the school as curator of historical records. I have not been able in that amount of time to review everything in the school's collection, but I have been able to come in contact with a lot of its history. As the school struggled with trying to make the school more relevant to the students being enrolled, there was this suggested and there was that suggested. Some of these suggestions came from within the school family. Some came from outside consulting groups brought in to study the school and its program. The first one was called the Anniversary Committee, headed by Leonard Mayo. This committee made its report to the Board of Managers in 1959 at the 50th anniversary of the school's founding. It concentrated almost entirely on the school's home life program. The school, as you remember, started as a home. People have asked, why the Hershey's call it a school if it was really a home? I really believe the answer lies in the fact that they did not want the institution they were creating to be called an orphanage. Milton himself was asked that question, and he said it was neither a school nor a home. It was a home school. Students were really homeschooled. They went to school in the same building that they lived in, and they were taught by the same people who became their surrogate parents. Over the years, the school's academic program was required to conform to state requirements. The division between the home program and the educational program became more pronounced. But the employment of people in the homes basically remained the responsibility of the farm home administration, which remained in the company Milton created in 1927, the Hershey Estate. One of the recommendations of the 50th Anniversary Committee was to have all employees who worked with students be employed and supervised by the school's educational staff. Her battles developed, continued, and intensified. Sometimes the best interests of students seem to be lost, or at the very least, compromised. In 1977, another study was conducted by an out-of-side group chaired by Robert M. Draken, a vocational educational specialist, as the focus of the group was on the school's vocational program. At that time, there did not seem to be enough time in the day to meet the state's academic requirements for graduation and teach the skills required for students to enter the world of work at the level being required by employers. The entire administrative staff of the structure of the school was examined, resulting in a number of recommendations. The most noted change resulted from this study was the elimination of the 2-week about schedule for the vocational program. Since the school building on the hill, Pat's Hill, had been opened, the students in the vocational program would spend 2 weeks in their vocational training and 2 weeks on their academic subjects. This now changed to allow for more classroom instruction. There were a number of other studies in the house and outside consultants in between the ones that I've mentioned, and I will not go into them at this time, only to say that the school was not sitting on its behind, but very active in learning how to do things better. I'd like to point this out at this point, that we should understand that Milton did not want his students used in studies or become subjects in some study that someone is conducting to prove some new educational theory. Therefore, over the years, there's been a reluctance to experiment with programs that have not been proven elsewhere before being installed in the program at the school. The program at the school was developed in the traditional Hershey way, learning by doing and making necessary adjustments as changes appeared necessary. However, with the increase in technology in the educational field, the school recognized its need for in-house research and for a more formalized approach to long-range planning. They formed a planning group in 1980 and a research division in 1987. But the Board of Managers, feeling that they wanted an outside group with new ideas and an understanding of the world's economics and the world of work, trends in the world, commissioned the Hay Group to study an in-depth study of the entire school. The Hay Group was an international organization of organizational consultants who were widely accepted in the business world, but they had never evaluated a school before. This study was completed in 1987 and formed the springboard for many of the things that happened later. Needless to say, there was much confusion as to what plan for the school and what it should be. There were many ideas that were good ideas and made sense in the world at large, but did they fit the situation at the Milton Hershey School? It was as Director of Planning and Research at the school that I began to realize that in all of these discussions and great ideas, there was very little real understanding of what it was that the Hershey's really intended. It drove me back to the original deed of trust, also to the articles in the Hershey Press and area newspapers that were written in the early days of the school as to what kind of school it was that was being created at the old Hershey farmhouse called the Homestead. It was at that point that I began to think about the need for a better understanding of Hershey's thinking when they signed their names to the document we affectionately call the Deed of Trust. The book, it was Kitty's idea, is not so much a book about facts and dates as it is a book about the why of the school. There seems to be a better understanding of the what of the school, but we were more interested in the why. Kitty, in my opinion, has never been given her rightful place in what has been written about the school or about the community of Hershey. The book is not an exhaustive study of the history of the school. It is a human story, or a human account of why the school. Included is a running account of some of the things that have happened between 1909 and 2005. I felt that I was in a position to write a book that emphasized the why. As I had access to the facts and what those who lived during the period when the school was founded had to say about it, I also had something else that many others did not have. That was a background of living that was very similar to the background Milton had as a youth and growing up in a Mennonite home. Ways of thinking, priorities in dealing with life, viewpoints on social matters, values held that many times are subconscious and become automatic as one copes with one's environment. As I studied Mr. and Mrs. Hershey's life in relationship to the school, as I talked with people who had worked with the Hersheys, I began to feel like I knew these people and understood them, almost like someone I had met before. Even our families came from the same general area, Switzerland, and left Switzerland for the same general reason. They settled in the same general area of Pennsylvania and must have contact with each other as the family names were intertwined at one point in the family genealogies. The reason I mention this is to point out the common understanding that values that are passed down from one generation to the next. I know there are many who have accepted the story that the Hershey's left Switzerland about 1709 and came to America. I question the time period that Milton's ancestors left Switzerland, although to this point I have no concrete information to dispute it. In the latter part of the 17th century, there was much unrest in the country we know today as Switzerland. Large parts of the country were Protestant, and parts of the country were Catholic. By the mid-1600s, things came to a boiling point, and the citizens were asked to swear allegiance to the canton in which they lived, which included a willingness to bear arms. Failure to support and bear allegiance to the canton's government meant a total confiscation of all property and loss of citizenship. In 1672, some 700 families, Protestant families, left Switzerland and traveled to areas of Germany where they were promised protection and the freedom to practice their non-resistant faith. I believe that is when the ancestors of Milton left Switzerland for the Planentine areas of Germany, where they lived as refugees before being recruited by William Penn's agents to come to Penn's Woods to find a new life and religious freedom. The very fact that Milton's ancestors and the Brubaker family ancestors went together to purchase and settle on land in present-day Lancaster County, on which now stands, of all things, Park City Shopping Center and the new campus of the Lancaster General Hospital, tells me that there's more to this story that needs to be investigated. Since people generally do not know Kitty, I would like to spend a few minutes in having you get to know her a bit better. Kitty is of Irish stock. Her father came from Cork County and her mother came from Clare County during the 1800s. And we all know what was happening in Ireland, the Great Potato Famine. It was during that time that they came to this country. Kitty was born in Jamestown, New York. And for years I thought Jamestown, New York was somewhere near to Brooklyn. But Jamestown, New York is in the western part of the state. She was born in a working Irish Catholic family that understood the needs of others. The background of Kitty was similar to Milton's, yet dissimilar. Kitty was a seed planter who never lived long enough to see her seeds mature. But she did live long enough to see that the seeds did indeed sprout. There were less than 50 boys in the school when Kitty died in 1950. However, Milton continued to remain faithful to the dream of a large family that they shared. We are told he carried her picture with him when he would go on trips. We are told he placed her picture on the nightstand beside the bed. It would be the last thing he would see before he fell asleep, and the first thing he would see when he opened his eyes in the morning. And this, ladies and gentlemen, over a period of 30 years. If only we could know her as Milton knew her, we could understand a great deal more about Milton Snavely Hershey. This is where the slide shows. Best ways to get you acquainted with Kitty is to show you some pictures of Kitty. Some you may have seen, and some you may not have seen. we might get the refreshments before we plan. Well, while we're waiting for Kitty to make our entrance, we all know that people say that Milton met Kitty in a candy store on one of his trips to the western part of the state and then the western part of New York. There's a question about that. Other people say that he met her in New York. But whether he met her in the western part of the state or whether he met her in New York, they went together about a year before they got married in 1898 in St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York in the rectory. We're not sure who the witnesses were to the wedding. We have a feeling it might have been the custodians in the church. They were married by the associate pastor that was there. And it's a very interesting thing, and if we get the projector working, we'll show it to you, their wedding certificate. It doesn't say Catholic. It doesn't even spell Kitty the way I do. It's spelled Kitty, K-I-T-T-I-E. Oh.
The numbers are a good sign, huh?
Anyway, Bill was about ready to leave the port one Sunday morning from his home in Lancaster, where he lived with his mother. And his mother was after him about getting married. After all, he was moving out of the range of being the most eligible bachelor in Lancaster. And she had a lady already picked out for him. But she was after him all the time, and he was leaving, going to the train station to go to New York on one of his business trips, so she thought. She stood on the porch with her hands on her hips, like we noticed in the picture that we have. And she said, Milton, you ought to stay home and attend to things, and you need to find a wife. And he turned around to his mother and said, this time when I return from my trip, I'm going to bring a wife with me. Well, and he did. And when Kitty, they had a short honeymoon after they were married on May the 25th, and brought her home, and when Kitty got off the train, off came, not suitcases, but trunks of clothes. Because Kitty was a very fashionable person. She loved clothes. She loved to wear hats, fancy hats, and things like that. And Milton's mother was sure that she had been maybe a burlesque girl. So they went to find something, Milton went to find something to get her to eat. The only thing he could find was coffee. And Mother Fanny was not about to be a part of the reception. But Milton fixed that. He had all of his more than 400 employees in his caramel factory in Lancaster at that time. He threw a party for all of them. Guess what it was? Chicken corn soup. And they all got a chance to meet Kitty. And Kitty would be the kind of person who loved to perform, who loved to entertain, who loved to be the life of the party. Milt, with his background, Mennonite background, and always only say something if you have something to say, kind of training. Sat in the corner, was proud of the peacock, that he could watch his Kitty. Kitty affectionately called him my little Dutchman. It's sort of a pet name that she called and introduced when some of her friends would come, when her sisters from Jamestown would come down to visit. Affectionately called him her little Dutchman. It wasn't long after they were married. What you want to give up, Susan?
Yeah, it worked today in the office.
Oh, but it should have worked here. Anyway, it wasn't long after they were married that they realized that Kitty had some physical problems. Many of their trips that they took to Europe were taken there because they were seeking out help from the doctors and people in England, in Europe. Some of the trips they took to hot springs in Arkansas were for the same purpose, but they never were able to give her much relief. People have asked me, what was it that Kitty died from? The official death certificate says that she died from pneumonia. But it was much more than that. It's almost something like Lou Gehrig's disease. I don't know if I've ever seen a document that has the exact name on it. She had been in Atlantic City, where she liked to spend a lot of her time because she didn't want people to take pity on her. She didn't want people to see how she was losing control over her hands and her feet. Milton would sit at the table and watch where it became impossible for her to pick up a fork or a knife. He would pretend not to notice and would say nothing. It soon became a situation where she had to have someone help to dress her, help to feed her. But she was in Atlantic City. Milton had gone back to Hershey for some business at the manufacturing plant. And Kitty decided she had a new nurse and a new chauffeur that's not used to Kitty. And Kitty decided she's come back to Hershey. And they said, no, you can't do that. You're supposed to stay here. It was Milton's instruction. She said, I'm going back to Hershey. And she did. The car that they had was like a convertible. We call it a convertible. She told them, I want that top down. Now, it is March. Weather in March. She's leaving Atlantic City with the top down. And she was that because she began to lose, oh, here we got it. I got to finish the story. She began to lose feeling. But she liked to have the wind against her face. And by the time they got as far as Philadelphia, she became so ill that the nurse said, we're stopping. Now, why they stopped at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, I'm not sure. Whether that was the hotel that she knew, or whether it was the first one they could find. And that's why Catherine Hershey died in Philadelphia, the Bellevue Stratford. Milton got there before she died, because he visited her in the room. And he asked Kitty, is there anything I can get for you? And she said, I would like a glass of sherry. And he went down to the bar to get this glass of sherry, and when he came back, he could see that something was wrong. And the nurse said, Kitty is gone. And the report of people that were there, the nurse said that Milton absolutely lost it. Okay? This overwhelmed with grief as the light of his life. They had a large funeral, the Blair Funeral Home on Chestnut Street in Philadelphia. Took 27 cars to carry the flowers. The trolley in Hershey stopped in respect. The work at the factory shut down. The whole town went in the mourning. Even special train went down to Philadelphia. Milton had her body placed in the Laurel Hill receiving hall, mausoleum, waiting burial until the cemetery here in Derry Township. Milton could not bring himself to bury her. She died in 1915 in March. It was not until April of 1919 that he actually buried her in the cemetery. He go to the Hershey Cemetery. Each day, each week rather, twice a week, he had fresh notices the Bureau of Vital Statistics telling him he's got to do something. He was successful in gaining training and getting extensions twice, about the third time. The interesting thing about her is about the fact that you see her name spelled there on the deed of trust. We can't make out whether it's C-A-T-H-A-R-I-N-E or C-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E. Can't make it out. I can't understand why every newspaper article that was written up until the time she died spelled it with an A. After she died, it starts spelling it with an E. I can't find a birth certificate. The baptismal certificate at the church in Jamestown isn't clear either. Why she would have noticed that on legal documents, I don't know, and said something about it. She was assertive about other things. So I went to the cemetery. I wanted to look at the monument that's there. See how they spelled it. Evidently, that same guy that started spelling with an E got there before me because it spelled with an E. Also, another thing that you need to be aware of. You'll see most things that say that Catherine was born in 1872. Not so, according to the church in Jamestown. How could she have been baptized? How could she have been baptized about the second week in June in 1971 if she wasn't born until June 1972? Just, that's nothing to do with it right. Move on. Please turn the lights up. Here's a picture. Now, I hope I don't get in anybody's throat. But we don't know for sure whether this is Kitty. We think it is. Why else would it be among Kitty's things? Why else would it be that the milk salvaged and kept together? We think that is her when she's 6 years old. Here she is. Isn't she pretty? She is 17 or 18 there. Here she is again, 18 years of age. You know that. That's how she looked when she worked in the store. That's how she probably looked when Milton saw her for the first time and fell flat on his face. I think the dress and things that she wears is so interesting. That's nothing compared to what you're going to see next. Now here's the store. Now that's Kitty right there. But look at the things. It's not a candy store.
Jewelry store.
I'm sorry, don't be rude. It's not a candy store. We don't know who this guy is, but we have a sneaking suspicion it might be her father. But if she worked in a candy store, why is it the only picture we have of her working in the store is in this store? This looks like a china shop, but selling sterling, things like that. Open windows on there, will you? Next. Here's the house on 28 Fairmont Avenue in Jamestown, New York, where she was born. That house is no longer standing. That picture was taken in 1955. Next. Here Kitty is. This is Kitty here. This is her sister, and that's her sister, and we think that's her mother. Taken on the porch there. Notice Kitty, even there, has a walking stick. Next. Here's that brand. That's how Milton looked when he first met Kitty. He's in his 40s early in, well, there's a whole interesting story I'd like to tell you about. I'm not going to tell you about Milton when he down in Lancaster County when he decided he was going to race horses to be the Blade Gate. Blade? Oh, whatever. All right, next. Here's their marriage certificate. Look how it's spelled. Kitty Sweeney. K-I-T-T-I-E. Now what goes through my mind is, they must have been so deliriously happy when they made their mind up to go into St. Peter to get married, that they didn't care how they spelled her name. I don't know. Milton was known to take a And he retained the rights to the chocolate, moved up here to Derry Township, and built a little, in the back of this building was what I call the first factory building, built about 1901, where he experimented in making the milk chocolate formula, where he perfected it. But it was too far to drive back and forth all the time, because he brought 13 families up with him, Lancaster. So they decided to move into the old homestead. Kitty, if you notice, any picture you ever see of the homestead without these on it, this won't even work. Without those dormers on the roof. Kitty put those on in 1905. Milton's father, no, Milton's grandfather. Milton's grandfather sold this building to the Gingrich family in 1868. And they're the ones that added the wood ends on each end of the homestead. The limestone part that had 4 rooms in it basically, I have the documents to show that the cost of that building to build in 1826 was $850.26. Now I imagine there was a lot of volunteer labor somewhere along there. And certainly the oaks that are in it, the timbers that are in that building probably were harvested right off of the land as they were clearing it, and also the limestone. Okay? And this is the home that they moved into in 1908 that Milton built. Now when the Rockefellers were building theirs, and J.P. Morgan and all the other financiers up in New York building their big mansions, Milton built this modest thing. Guess how much that cost? Furnished. $53,000. The original contract was for $34,000 something. It was bigger on the drawing it originally planned, because the plan was built in the back with some more on there. And now Ray Cameron had his office there. Right, Ray? That's right. I'll tell you. Now, Kitty was a fun-loving person. If Kitty was here tonight, she'd have you in stitches. Here she is on the ship, one of her trips. All these guys around here, I don't know who, I think that guy's a doctor, but he likes to smoke. This is Milton. How about that? Never saw him in a hat like that, did you? And Kitty, guess where she is? Right there. I'd like to know who these people are. I don't know who they are, but I know that whenever they would make a trip across the ocean, there was always people that they knew that they went with next. Now here she is clowning again. Here's these guys. This guy's still smoking his pipe. And there she is clowning. She's the life of the party. No wonder Milton loved her. She could do all the things that Milton was all thumbs with. He got with people in a social situation, he didn't know what to say, usually. And when he got up in front of people, when he dedicated a building, he still didn't know what to say. Hey, here she is at the, we think this is taken in the park, and she's pulling some guy's ear. Oh, well. Now, here Kitty is out in Arkansas. We took a trip out there, and I'm sure that it was for Kitty's health benefit. But this was a picture that was taken out there in Hot Springs, Arkansas. That's another picture of Hot Springs, Arkansas. Look at that. You think she didn't have fun? He's poking fun at somebody. Giving him the finger. We don't have to do it. Milton's standing here. He'll have none of that. He smoked his cigar. You don't smoke 7 cigars a day. Or chew on them. Mostly he just chewed on them, but better 7 cigars a day, and they were Havanas too. But now look, this is something that always happens on these motor trips. Here I am. No. Put on the new tire. She's still having fun. Look at the tires on top of the thing. I'll tell you. You know they didn't even pay 322 down past the homestead until about 1929? That was a gravel road. Anybody here remember that as a gravel road? Oh, you're all younger than I am. So Yeah, here she is in her Jenny Lynn. She loved to ride around in that. She used to talk to the horse, like the horse was real. You know, like some people talk to their dog. You know, she used to talk to the horse, and the horse would say something to the horse, something to the effect that live horse, eat grass tomorrow, or something like that. Next. Now we come to 1910. These are the first boys in the school. Notice that they all line up like little soldiers, like they're in a play or something. And there's Carlo. That was the first dog the boys had in the school. I don't know whether the dog was allowed in the house or not. Usually the dogs in the house, a dog like that was allowed in the house. Here, Kitty is way down here again. She always sat with Milton when the boys in the school would go over for breakfast, which was about 4 times a year. And she would sit next to him because she didn't want the boys to notice that she had trouble with the utensils. And Milton, next to her, gave her a feeling of security of that. Someone wanted to help. Here she is, right, back up. Here she is. This is the only picture I have with boys. Now over here, can you see that? Can you see anything there? That's Mrs. Cordova. Spoke 7 languages. Was her housekeeper? The housekeeper. Not the maid. Not the cook. But she was the manager. She would arrange for all the trips they would take and things like that. She wasn't supposed to be in that picture. This picture was taken by George Copenhagen, the first superintendent. Here's Fanny. Does Fanny look happy? Here are the boys. I don't know if any of these boys are living anymore. I doubt. No, what is it? About 1914? 1914. Fanny, you can see, to me, that picture doesn't really look well. Okay. Here Fanny, here Catherine is again with Ruth Hershey, and there's Milton. Now, I want to point, keep going, because I want to point this out for you. Here she is again with Ruth. Spent a lot of time with Ruth. Ruth Hershey, who was Dr. Hershey's daughter. Did a lot of traveling with Catherine and Milton. Here she is again with two sisters. Look at the picture on the pillow. I don't know why that is. There's a pillow there. Look at the parasol. Okay? Notice, every picture I'm going to show you of them in a group, Milton and Catherine are never sitting beside each other. Maybe that, I don't know. Maybe that was the way it was when you hosted. You were the host and hostess of a group. Who these fellows are, I don't know. I think there's some friends from Lancaster. In the Lancaster, he was down there. This guy looks rather important. He looked like he reads rather well, too. This is Kitty here. And this is taken in the oval room at the homestead. We have this furniture here we have in storage. And someday when we get into new facilities that they're now planning, we plan to have this stuff on exhibit where people can come and see it. Yes. Here we are again out back of the High Point in the gardens here. Guess where Kitty is? Guess where Milton is? Next. Guess where Milton is? Where is he? Oh! Where's Kitty? There? Next. Here they are again. I can't figure this out. Susan pointed out the fact there's a rabbit. Is there a rabbit missing?
The lady that's laying down. The bunny. The ceramic, looks like a ceramic bunny. Oh, yeah.
Where's Milton? Where's Kitty? Next. There she is. I think this is Mrs. Andrews. The good friends of theirs from Philadelphia. When Kitty died, she had a lot of furs. And Milton took them back to the guy that he bought them from down Lancaster's Cut. I mean, down in Philadelphia, and the guy wouldn't buy them back. He says, I'm in the business of selling furs, not buying them. So Milton came back, he couldn't get rid of them, and he didn't know what to do with them. This lady said, well, I'll take them and get rid of them for you. I never saw another document anywhere about this fur. If you were invited to the High Point for a social or something, this is probably one of the invitations you'd get. Fancy things like this. Here's the thing. Look at that. Look at those fancy furs. Look at that fancy dress. Isn't it beautiful? Next. How about that one? You know, I have a book about this big, about that thick, full of conifers and hats. And she'd pick out one that she liked and take it to whoever it was. This is what I want. There she is again. Look at that beautiful, beautiful dress. I guess she didn't need a pillow because there's no shoes you can see. Two more. Okay. I don't know what that pose was. But anyway, this was taken over in France, East France, 1911. Wearing that hat. Here they are together. Of course, you've seen that picture, haven't you? If you didn't see it, you buy the book, it's from the front. Here Kitty is at High Point. This was taken, we believe, it was taken in the fall of 1914. Kitty dies in 1950. Sitting down, all these flowers and everything else around. She loved rose bushes. That's why we have a rose garden. That's why we had the American Rose Association commissioned a rose, the Hershey Rose. That's Kitty. Next. This is Milton. I gotta tell you this. Milton never wanted to have his picture taken. He wouldn't let anybody take it. A painter wanted to paint it. Wouldn't let, but they were making the film, The Halls of Montezuma. Maybe some of you know about that movie picture. The year is 1931. Studios down in Philadelphia. They shot a lot of pictures of Milton in the factory and the town and everything. And this fellow that ran this studio had a young artist by the name of Pierce. And they took clips out of the movie, and he painted this picture of Milton. And the community center had just opened up. What do they call it now? Hershey headquarters. What do they call it? It's Hershey. Hershey. What is it? It's yesterday.
The Hershey Complex.
Anyway, they had just opened it up, and they had this picture behind the drape, and they were going to bring Milton there and have him see it. So they brought Milton in. Milton thought he was going to see the halls of Montezuma, the movie. So they came in and they had this thing in the big foyer, and they pulled the thing down. Milton looked at it, stared at it. He says, I look like Herbert Hoover, don't I? Well, that was 1931. Milton died in 1945. We went back to the same artist and asked him whether he would paint another one. Okay? That's Kitty. That's Kitty. We had him brought to the school. We had them put in the auditorium of the senior hall, the front. And we had them moved to the side when they renovated everything in the 60s. And when they decided to completely do something else with senior hall, we got a hold of them and put them in the storage. And we had the restorator that does stuff for the state come and restore them. And today they are in Founders Hall. Go over there in the rotunda, you can see them in Founders Hall. The pictures were painted 15, 20 years apart from each other. And the woodwork, I'll put a plug in for the Hershey Lumber Company and the boys in the vocational program. That's that solemn moment. I heard the number two yet. And there we're back to 1915. Okay. I want to leave you with this thought. We're going to close. It was Milton's advice to his manager. In 1916, he met with all his managers before he went to Cuba on a trip. In fact, he had delayed 2 days his trip to Cuba because he wanted to be there when he introduced a fellow by the name of George Signor, who was going to be the new overall superintendent over the school, farm, everything that wasn't chocolate factory. And he wanted to be there. And he said this, and I still think it applies today. You'll see this in the book. But I got to tell you a little story only you people know, because I'm going to tell you. When it came time to print that book, I couldn't find where my source was for this. And I was scared to death somebody picked me up on it, so I said it was anonymous. You'll see it in the book as anonymous. But it's not anonymous. You can scratch that out. It was October the 16th, 1916. I finally found it. Of course, after the book was written. He said, cooperation, he told me. Cooperation is the only true solution to many of our problems. More and more we are awakened to its possibilities, whereby each one labors for the interest of the whole body, realizing that individual success depends upon success for all, as no one is independent of his neighbor. Well, thank you for your attention, your interest, and your patience. I gotta get this commercial in yet. My sincere hope is that you will find time to spend together and continue to support your organizations in our community that are performing the duty of being the collective memory of us all. Thank you very much. If any of you have any questions, there's still one. Refer to Kathy. Anyone have any questions? Yes. The death certificate says pneumonia, but there's more to it than that. She had a delivery disease of the system that caused her to lose control over her extremities. It did not affect her mind, did not affect her speech that we know of, but I've never seen what it actually was. It's something like Lou Gehrig's disease. Something I would say would be very similar to what Lloyd had. Might be the same thing. But we just don't know. Yes.
I have another question, Dr. Breckbill. When was now president of Bannon, the missions building was originally 3 acres before the barn burned down and was back at the hospital. What was the number of that unit? It either had to be 26B or 27B. Does anyone in this group remember?
You're certain the Green Acres?
It was 3 acres because...
Then they created another Green Acre.
That's right. I have something I'll show you. But the second Green Acres became Farm 62 was after the barn burned down when the original Green Acres came back around 1938 or 37.
You're very close. You're very close.
We watched it burn from up on the hill. That's why I know that
I really don't know the answer to that.
it was attributed to John Stock or something like that.
I knew John and Essie very well.
But I was trying to figure out, I knew it either had to be